Hello and welcome back to Shock's Talks. I'm Shakti and we're in season 2, the psychic season. So I've been covering a lot of UFO events and building out a timeline for all of us so that we could have these deeper conversations. And this season, I'm taking a look at the remote viewing side of the phenomena more closely and diving into meditation and the consciousness system that we all exist within, and how each individual can have a sense of agency and progress within this system, and that is in order to be able to collaborate with each other to affect greater change later down the line. So it's a beautiful day, the birds are singing, and I'm loving the sunshine that's starting to come back as we're rounding the corner, leaving winter behind. Not quite yet, but hopefully in the coming months we'll feel a little bit fresher in general. And I have a bunch of different random notes, but I'm going to start off by just showing you Journeys Out of the Body. This is Robert Monroe's book, and this is the man who started the Monroe Institute, which is the place where Tom Campbell studied consciousness. And this 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 book, I read it a couple years ago, well, over a decade ago, so I got another copy so that I could reread it. But I've been working with the Gateway tapes, and in the last episode I gave you a bunch of links to the CIA's involvement in the Gateway program and looking into it. It's basically the hemisync technology, which is binaural beats, a special audio system that you listen to through headphones in order to create coherence in the mind and sharper focus and the ability to have what some call out-of-body experiences, astral travel, or just deeper meditations. And I've basically been listening to these recordings before bed and waking up and listening in the morning for the last couple weeks now. And I'm feeling a lot of really positive effects from that practice. So we're going to talk more about that. But I've also been getting questions from friends lately around what's going on with UFOs and what's happening, give me the update, what's going on these days. And my answer is basically like, well, not a whole lot. It's more of the same. So let me give you a little bit of an update here. The Soul Foundation has been releasing and posting their videos on YouTube from their very first conference that just happened. And that was November 17th and 18th, 2023, at Stanford University. And this is headed up by Gary Nolan. He's the head of the Department of Pathology. And the conference featured speakers like Avi Loeb, Charles McCullough, Christopher Mellon, Diana Walsh-Pasulka, Jacques Vallée, and other leading voices. So this was that very serious, scientific, sort of academic conference that occurred where everyone is putting their focus on legitimizing the topic of UFOs, looking at it from a spiritual and religious perspective, looking at a disclosure timeline from a government perspective, looking at the science that's going on, ongoing science around this. And basically we are slowly reaching a point in reality where more and more people are getting on board with the fact that this is real, this is worth our attention, this is worth our time and money and effort to figure out what's going on. And it's so multifaceted and it's so complex, and there are many different theories, but at the end of the day, there's enough evidence to suggest that this is a real threat in some ways, at least in the airspace, for people that are operating airplanes, both military and civilian, that if we pretend it's not real or ignore it, we don't have the proper protocols in place for reporting and for safety procedures, because it's just a thing that's out there that's actually disrupting people's lives. And then there's the whole contactee side of it. There's the spiritual aspect of the great history of religious experiences that share characteristics with UFO experiences or contact experiences. So the conversation is gaining a lot of momentum right now. So if I had to give you an update in terms of what's going on, that would be one of the major updates, just that there's a continued conversation. A lot of people are joining the conversation. Many different groups have been rising and falling over the years. So we're seeing the rise of a few new groups and organizations now, but it feels very exciting and promising because these groups are drawing more attention and more credible investigative journalists and researchers and professors and scientists and people with money that can help fund the effort. So that's very exciting. And the links are below for the Soul Foundation website as well as the videos that they're posting on YouTube. And I'm also sharing a link with you, which is this, I think it was a National Geographic episode of a show, and this episode is called The Global Threat: UFOs Investigating the Unknown. And I just came across it and watched it one day while I was working on something else. And this features Leslie Kane, who we've talked about a lot on this channel. And it's a great episode to just sort of get a chunk of the reality of what's going on from Kane's perspective. And the documentary filmmaker James Fox is also in this episode. And they talk about different major events that we've covered on this channel. They talk about the Phoenix Lights, and it's really just so fascinating to go over that story again. So I recommend watching this episode so that you can get that story more in depth, and you see a lot of footage and you see the actual the governor and this press release where they get someone to dress up as an alien and make fun of everything. And then in this story, like years later, that same person comes back out and says, actually, you know, it was real. Like, we just didn't know what to do. And I kind of freaked out and basically did the dumbest thing possible. And was like, of course, between a rock and a hard place because we haven't had support in terms of being able to even acknowledge these things when they occur. But the Phoenix Lights happened in 1997, and this was an event with, I want to say, hundreds of witnesses. Yes, hundreds of witnesses. There was a boomerang-shaped object that was over a mile long that hundreds of different people saw. And the governor, who came out later and told his story, admitted that he actually was a witness as well. He even saw it himself. So it's a fascinating case to really look at and understand how tricky it is, how complicated. There's layers of emotion, layers of government involvement that just cause a lot of bumps in the road and have made it really hard to just get this information out and for people to get the support they need or the protection they need when an event like this is going on. A lot of the witnesses felt just fully enraged by the fact that no one was taking them seriously because they weren't crazy and they did see something real. So fascinating case. Definitely recommend checking out that episode. They also cover the Chicago O'Hare sighting, which is an interesting one because, and we did talk about that on a previous episode of Shocks Talks, but this sighting is one that involved commercial pilots, and it was the same situation. They saw something, people felt afraid, there weren't proper channels for reporting. There was a lot of scrambling around after the fact to make up silly stories about what it could have been, and Leslie Kane did some deep investigation and basically debunked those theories. These weather phenomena that they were claiming were possible were absolutely impossible because the whole punch cloud that they claimed occurred, that, you know, this was a weather phenomenon, not a UFO punching a hole through a cloud physically with its craft body. But this weather thing would have had to happen at below freezing temperatures, and the temperatures were like 50 degrees there at the time. So what Kane is pointing out is just like how easy it is to actually reach the truth by taking these steps to investigate the claims and talk to the witnesses and look at the radar data in all these various cases and look at all of the reports and debunk the cover stories. And so Kane is doing a really incredible job, and it's just cool to see her in action. You can see her in that episode. And let's see, what else do we have in updates? There is a new website for Kelly Chase. Kelly Chase is the creator of the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast, and I linked Kelly's website below. Kelly has been gaining a lot of momentum over the years and also just put out a really interesting episode of her podcast, which you can get on YouTube or on Spotify, probably other places too. And she talks about the sort of spiritual events that she experienced in her life that were really life altering and set her on this path of working in this field. And so we'll get back to that later too. But I recommend checking out her latest episode of the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast and her website on talkalypse.com. And that will be a collaborative project that she's working on, and I think she's going to be involved in a bunch of different things. So I'll keep you posted as like new things are released. Right now, I'm not breaking down all of these videos on this channel, so I'm just sending you off to do your own research. We will get back into that a little later in the season, but right now, I just want to talk a little bit more about the meditation side of things and why it relates to all of this. And so there's also a new video from Tom Campbell that I linked below, and he is the physicist who has a theory of everything that describes the nature of this reality. And I think it's really relevant to this conversation, and I'm gonna go ahead and just play you a little clip from that right now. Hopefully the audio will be good and we can just listen to Tom in his own words talking about the consciousness system and kind of our ability to interact with it, and then that's what we're going to dive into.
Needs this database in order to work with. So it does that. It looks at the state of everything now in this virtual reality, and since it's computing it all, it knows exactly what that state is because it's computing the whole thing. And then it says, well, give present trends and so on, and we'll guess that here's what's going to happen next. And if that happens, then here's what would happen after that, and so on. So it can build this database of possibilities and with probabilities of those possibilities. And it does that just because it has data on us for millennia. It understands us and how we work and individuals and how they work and so on, because it's doing the computation. Our body here is an avatar. We are a piece of consciousness playing that avatar. Okay, so that's the way it works. So
Cool. So that's Tom in his own voice talking about his theory. And the reason I think this little snippet is relevant to today's conversation is because we're going to talk a little bit about metaphor and how it relates to this consciousness system. And we're going to talk about intentions and the power of intentions. And the phrase that popped into my mind that a lot of people use when it comes to the idea of intentions is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And what they're trying to say with this phrase is that you can have whatever intention you want, but if you don't take the action to back it up, then basically you ain't shit. You know what I mean? So I agree with that. And let's not get confused when we're talking about intentions in this conversation or when Tom is talking about intentions, because what we are talking about is intention as a power in and of itself in the realm of consciousness, but also it is foundational to us taking the actions required in physical matter reality to actualize the future probability that we want. So, whenever I talk about intention or think about intention, I am thinking about intention as the deepest truth, the truth behind my choices, the truth behind my words, the truth behind my actions. And I am not thinking about it as some kind of like, well, I meant to do this, or in my heart, this is what I was thinking, because that's not even real. In that sense, when people are talking about intentions like that, it's not even real. When we're talking about intentions within the context of the larger consciousness system, we're talking about an essential truth, which is the quality of your consciousness. So, the reason meditation is so important is because in order for us to get to the next steps in reality of creating more peace around the world, or ending war, or uncovering government secrets, or creating systems that support the well-being of more individuals, we have to create strong and clear intentions within ourselves that we can then use to take action in reality. So, I'm going to give an example of my own life and the work that I've done with meditation and how it's impacted my ability to be effective in reality. In my early 20s, I hit a really rough patch. I had a lot of emotional stuff going on, like, don't we all, And I got involved in all kinds of negative, destructive habits and groups of people and energies that were all chaotic and spinning out of control. And there was substance abuse involved, and there was a lack of sleep involved. And I was struggling to take care of my body, and I was getting really sick all the time, and I was struggling to hold down a job, and I was getting fired from jobs, and I didn't even have a place to live. At one point I was staying with some friends, but also kind of sleeping in a car, and my life was a total mess. And during that time, I also had a lot of profound spiritual awakening experiences, which were incredible and set my life on a whole new course that brought me here. And I'm so grateful, and it was all worth it, and it was all my journey, and it was what was meant to be. But when I came out of that dark night of the soul time, I had a lot of work to do in terms of just getting my shit together so that I could be more effective in reality. And it was a very slow process. It takes years. It is not something that can be done overnight. And I applied every tool in the toolbox when it comes to meditation, self hypnosis, healing techniques, studying, learning, and even just practical learning, not even spiritual learning, but like how to approach finances, things that no one ever taught me. So, I started with my body because that was the most essential level. Like, that was where I needed to start to do anything else. My body was sick. My mind was sick. I was having schizophrenic episodes. I was in the mental hospital. I was on and off of various medications, and I was in a really rough place. So I had to start at ground zero, which was I got to get my head straight. So I did a ton of meditation, yoga, reading. I made my own positive brainwashing recordings that I listened to on repeat for many nights in a row while I slept. And they included positive affirmations for healing. And I worked with other energy healers. I worked with people who you might call shamans, who do things like soul retrieval and help you to clean out your energetic body when things have gotten out of control. If I had to create a metaphor to describe what my energy looked like at that time, it would be similar to those birds that get caught in a toxic oil spill. They cannot help themselves. They need someone else to come in and clean off that gunk because it's not natural. to them, to their reality, and so they don't even know how to like deal with it. They haven't evolved to be able to deal with that. And nor should they, because it's not, that's our problem. We did that to them. So whatever. I had accumulated so much toxic gunk in my energy body, in my mind. I was a total mess. I needed a lot of help, and I got a lot of help. Thank the universe. And then I had to work with therapists and cognitive behavioral therapists, and I had to create patterns for myself that would support my well-being, and I had to work with my mental chemistry and my specific system to really understand what it takes for me to have a clear head and a balanced mind and body. And I had to learn about circadian rhythms, and I had to prioritize sleep, and I had to learn to protect myself from overstimulation in certain settings and take time to be alone. And I had to build a life that supported all of these things. And then little by little, because I really wanted to get up and out into the world and be able to live on my own and support myself financially, and I did not have anyone to help with that, I had to learn about money, and I had to learn about practical things, and I had to learn how to show up for a job even when my mind was flooded with the remnants of these really intense schizophrenic episodes that I had been through. And I had to learn to multitask, which meant be in the world doing a job even while there was background voices going on or other really insane, intense things kind of playing out in my mind. And I had to learn how to separate myself from that. And I had to learn how to put one foot in front of the other and just live a very boring, peaceful, straightforward existence. And the more I did that, the more beautiful that existence became to me. And then the more energy was freed up for me to do other things. And I was able to cultivate other skills and participate in a really high level job and move up in that job and do all kinds of cool things with my life. And now here I am back in this realm of the thing that initiated this path in the first place, which was anomalous experiences. And I am learning to be more effective in this realm by doing lots of research because I've created a peaceful, quiet life with enough stability and space in it that I have the privilege of being able to look into my own interests and create this content. So this is just one example of what it can look like and how much time it can take. It's been over a decade now of me working diligently, nonstop on my willpower, on my personal peace and integrity, and on my practical life skills. And I still feel like I'm just barely getting my footing in reality because there's so much more that I want to do and that I want to be a part of. And right now, I still have to wake up every day, make my bed, figure out what I'm going to eat for the day, just life things. And we all have these life things. And a lot of people have layers of life things that are even more complex than anything I could ever speak to. For example, having children. If you have kids, you're really there to support and pay attention to them, and all that other stuff, personal hobbies and interests and everything else, may or may not even be possible for the time that you're raising those kids. So why am I talking about all of this? Because as much as it feels exciting to look at these grand movements happening in reality and to get big ideas about what needs to change, I think the first step is to focus on what we need to change within ourselves just to be more effective in reality. So, in terms of these life altering experiences, Kelly Chase does a really good job of describing her personal awakening on that podcast episode that I was mentioning earlier. And she also talks about the fact that thousands of people have had experiences like this. And if you look into the work of Diana Walsh Pasulka, you will see that she is also primarily focusing on the spiritual and anomalous experiences that people have either in meditative states or spontaneously, that cause them to change their lives entirely or awaken them to a greater understanding of reality, or sometimes even imbue them with what some might call powers or abilities. These things happen all the time. So there are frameworks for understanding these things. There are patterns that you can see in terms of different people and their experiences. And also, each one is completely individual and seems very personalized. So, this aspect of the phenomena feels like really good evidence to support Tom Campbell's theory that the larger consciousness system is, in and of itself, conscious and is working with us. It's working with us to help us evolve. So he calls these things nudges, and it could be like a synchronicity or a vision or a message that you get, or just kind of being put in the right place at the right time, like by the universe itself, or universe isn't even the right word, but that's why he says larger consciousness system. A lot of people just say universe kind of colloquially to be like the whole thing, like God, whatever you want to call it, the system of life that we're in. So, the reason that meditation is so foundational and important is because as we are beginning to gain access to this larger consciousness system, it's kind of like leveling up in a video game. And you know how when you get to like a high level, you have all these different distractions, all these obstacles, all these things coming in. The difficulty level is just getting higher and higher. But when you're a really good player and you've been at it for a really long time, you have this just beautiful laser focus and you just navigate all that insanity like a ballet dancer. And then you get through and you just have this great feeling of success and accomplishment. I think in a lot of ways, that's what life becomes like when you're on a spiritual pathway. From what I've heard and from what I've experienced, there's no version of reality where just like everything is chill and we're just like, yay, it's all easy now and great. Kind of like the challenges continue to get bigger and bigger, and you just become more and more adept. You're better at handling those challenges. So, meditation is your best chance at cultivating the willpower, the clarity of mind, the mental muscles kind of that you need to navigate these higher levels. And as a collective, we're all seeing that we are at a high level of the game right now. There's a lot of challenges going on. And it's really hard to go through every day and just handle what you need to handle in a day because there are so many emotional disruptions throughout any given day for everyone that I know. And so, how do we continue to move through and remain engaged in life and fulfilled and loving and making good choices and positive choices and also helping to contribute to these larger goals that we have? Well, I think meditation is a really good way to stay on that track. So, one of the things that I've been enjoying in the Gateway tapes, and this is something that you can do on your own, you don't need to listen to these binaural beats. You don't need any of these tools. They're all just tools, and there is no one way to accessing this ability to navigate the larger consciousness system. There are just multiple ways, and there are ways that people are going to make up that none of us have even thought of yet, and that's so cool. So I'm just talking about the ways that I've been experimenting with. And in one of these Gateway tapes, there's an exercise called Recharge, where you go through your initial steps, you do your resonant tuning, you create your sort of visualization of an energy bubble. It's sort of like a toroidal fountain of energy that comes up and out the top of your head and circulates back down and up through the bottoms of your feet. And again, this is just a visualization, just a metaphor to create a sense of protection while you're in this altered state. And Bob has created something that he calls energy conversion box. And you visualize a box and you create a very heavy lid for it, and you lift up that lid, and then you place your physical body in the box. all of your worries and anxieties and concerns and energies and whatever else might get in the way of your meditation practice or your out of body experience. And then you close that heavy lid and you turn away from that box and you move on into the exercise as just consciousness. And in this particular recording, he has you go back and lift the lid of the box. And when you do that, you start pulling out fear. So you find a fear and you pull out the fear. And I usually kind of think of what that fear is. Like, let's just say, we'll go with a really basic and common one, the fear that I'm unlovable. And you pull up the fear and you kind of look at the fear and then you visualize it floating away like a balloon or like a bubble rising in the water. And then under that layer of fear, you find an emotion. So, what is the emotion that was uncovered? And maybe that emotion was deep sadness and loneliness, and maybe there's shame in there. And you lift up those emotions and then you release those. And then you look below the fear and emotion and you find a memory. And the memory might be, I was abandoned as a kid. This is not my personal story. I'm using an example. But let's say there was a moment of abandonment and you revisit that moment and then you reintegrate the memory. And essentially, what this symbolizes to me is the process of basically looking at triggers and then looking at the truth that lies below, because there was a real reason that this happened. And if you can be in a neutral place with it, that information cannot hurt you. That information is just information, and it's the truth of your experience. And if you can work through the fear and the emotion, then you can move beyond that experience and you're no longer being driven by your subconscious fears and emotions, but you've integrated the lesson of that experience and you can move forward lighter and clearer. So I really like this exercise and I've been doing it a couple days in a row now. And, there's just so much to dig up. There's always something new. But I feel like it's a really important process because as we go deeper into meditation and as we start to access data from the database, we are going to most likely be triggered from time to time. And I'm going to give you a direct example from my life again. Uh, Over 5 years ago now, I think it was somewhere around then, maybe 4 years ago, I was in a relationship and I was choosing to trust my partner. And I got a vision. I think it was actually a dream that happened while I was sleeping, but I saw him in the place where he lived, sort of like laying on this couch with his roommate who was someone of the opposite sex that he would be attracted to. And I clearly saw them together. It was very emotional and disturbing, but I decided to just confront him about it and ask him. And through doing that, I found out that yes, in fact, he was starting a relationship with this other person. So essentially cheating. And we were able to end that relationship and go our separate ways. But had I received that information and allowed it to trigger me in a negative way that enabled my subconscious fear and emotion to drive my actions, I could have gone over there and whatever, broken their windows with a hammer or done something emotional and stupid or been harmful to myself or him. So, what I'm trying to say here is that something that Tom talks about is how, in order to progress in your ability to access this data, you do have to evolve your consciousness simultaneously. Because if you're not ready to handle this higher level of information, there is a good chance that the larger consciousness system is not going to give it to you until you are ready. So, are there ways around this? Do people bypass it? Of course, absolutely. Everything is possible and all kinds of crazy things are going on. But in general, in order for us to access these higher levels of knowing, we have to be responsible. And it's the old comic book thing, like with great power comes great responsibility. So, in order to continue becoming more powerful and effective in reality, we also have to become more loving and more grounded. And we have to have the ability to exercise our will over our impulses. And we have to have the ability to stop and think about what we want to do and make solid choices. And all of those are reasons why meditation is a handy tool, because meditation is like, a friend of mine calls it her Jedi training when she's starting to meditate and exercise more. And that's exactly what it is. It's your constant commitment to yourself and to the world that you're going to bring your best self into each day, that you're going to bring your conscious awareness into each choice, and that you're going to continue to evolve and move towards love. And one other thing on this topic, and then I'll probably have to end this because I do feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but the aspect of shame. You know, as we're progressing on these paths, we are going to look back and we're going to see a completely different person behind us. And we're going to say, like, in a way, it might feel like, God, what was wrong with me then? Why was I so shallow? Why did I make those bad decisions? Why was I so insecure? Why was I so thoughtless? Like, how could I hurt other people? And if you're not careful, you can just get caught in a tailspin and you can get so consumed by that shame and pain, the real pain of recognizing your own wrongdoings, that it can drag you and suck you back into that place, and it can kind of keep you trapped in those cycles. And so in order to progress forward and to evolve, it takes so much courage, because you really have to be able to love and accept and forgive and acknowledge yourself for who you were and where you are now and where you might be if you keep going in the right direction. And you know, back to Tom Campbell again, I've heard him talk about it in terms of like toddlers versus teenagers versus adults, you know, like there's just different levels of development and understanding in humans as we grow through our age categories. And the same is true for any individual on a path of consciousness evolution. We're going to pass through different stages. And when you're comfortable and familiar with that, you can look back and be like, oh, I was a cute little toddler. Like, I was like hitting my sister, or I was doing something bad and wrong, but I didn't know any better. I didn't know, and now I do know, and it's okay. That's all part of it. I wasn't meant to be perfect from the beginning. We're all here learning and growing. We're changing and we're moving through these things. And so it takes a lot of love and courage to be able to look back and be like, you know, that was then, this is now, and I'm just going to keep on going. And it also gives us the ability to look around us, and when we see other people acting unconsciously or harmfully or in really bad ways, instead of getting caught up just like obsessing over it, judging them, criticizing them, you can kind of take a breath and go, okay, that's where they are. And I may or may not have any control or influence over their trajectory and where they choose to go from here. But I can send them love and support, and I can just stay in my lane and focus on what I need to focus on. And I can look at them and think to myself, okay, you're unconscious of your bad choices right now. Like, what am I unconscious of? What are my blind spots? Let me focus on me. What do I need to figure out right now? Because they're on their own path, and it doesn't matter, you know, like our business is to do our own job of evolving ourselves, at least from my perspective. So that is a lot of stuff about my personal life and meditation. Um, I hope that it's helpful, and I hope that it feels exciting and inspiring. And if it just feels like a bunch of nonsense, then I guess it's probably just not for you. And thank you for listening and being here. And thanks for bearing with me while I try to just like move through my own thoughts and speak from my heart. And I will continue to try different things on this channel, including going back to more serious notes and reports. And I do have some stuff brewing in the next couple months that's going to kind of take things for a turn here. But right now, I guess I'm sort of vamping until I get to that point. I have some surprises down the line and exciting stuff that I'll be able to share with everyone. But for today, just thank you so much. And if you would be so kind as to align your intentions with your actions, if you have the intention of me succeeding and growing my channel, please just hit that little thumbs up, because it takes nothing away from you except for like this amount of energy. And if you are aligned with getting more of this content, you can hit the subscribe. If you want to get it right when it drops, you can hit the bell for notifications. And if you know of anyone that might find any of this interesting this season or the previous season, if you want to do a deep dive into UFO history, please share this content with anyone who you think might like it. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time on Shakti Talks.